A routine boarding turns ugly when the young black woman, Alana, faces a humiliating moment at the gate. The gate agent's smug prejudice sets the tone, but Alana's calm defiance flips the power dynamic. A single ripped boarding pass becomes a symbol, and a storm is hinted at in the skies above. We don't trust people like you. The words spat out like rotten fruit at the boarding gate, slicing the hum of the busy terminal in half. Passengers nearby froze, some pretending not to hear, others openly staring over their suitcases and half-drunk coffees. Gate 47 buzzed with the usual airport chaos, rolling suitcases thudding over tile, children whining, a distorted intercom announcing delays. Overhead, rain slapped the wide glass windows. Streaking the world outside into silver smears. At the center of it all stood Alana Davis, 26. Calm-eyed, her hair wrapped in a simple silk scarf. She clutched her boarding pass, nails, tapping the paper in slow rhythm. Her seat was booked, her bag was checked, her ID matched her ticket. But the uniformed gate agent blocking her path grinned like he'd just found something filthy on his shoe. "Excuse me?" Alana's voice was quiet but carried, like a single clear note in a crowded bar. "I said." The agent leaned forward, the shine of his plastic name badge catching the harsh airport lights. "We don't trust people like you. Might be up to something, trying to sneak into business class or the cockpit. Who knows?" A thin laugh rose from somewhere behind her, a man in a suit muttering under his breath. A mother pulled her daughter closer, as if standing next to Alana might stain her coat. Alana looked past the agent at the open jet bridge. Rows of faces peered out from the plane windows, shadows behind scratched plastic. She wondered what they'd think if they could hear this now, this small humiliation, broadcast like static over the terminal. She could taste the bitter iron of rage rising at the back of her throat, but she wouldn't swallow it. She wouldn't spit it out either. She would shape it. "Sir, my boarding pass is valid," she said, steady. "Scan it." The agent's smile sharpened. He snatched the paper from her hand, tore it down the middle with a childish flick of his wrist. The halves fluttered to the floor, landing between Alana's spotless sneakers. A gasp, quick and bright, escaped an older woman in line. Someone lifted a phone, half hidden behind a magazine, pretending to film the departure board but angling, just enough to catch the gate agent's smug posture. "You can't board without a pass," the agent said. "Step aside, miss." Rain pounded the glass harder, a muted drumbeat. Overhead, a voice announced turbulence warnings for departing flights. A hint, a whisper of the chaos yet to come. Alana crouched, gathering the torn halves of her pass. She brushed a finger over the rip, felt the paper's soft edge as if testing a blade. She rose slowly, looked the gate agent in the eye. Her voice, when it came, was soft enough to hush the restless feet around her. "You're right," she said. "People like me? You don't trust us." She slipped the torn pass into her jacket pocket. "That's your mistake." A beat of silence. Then Alana stepped aside, but only to turn toward the customer service desk, leaving the agent blinking at her calm defiance. Behind her, the rain pressed harder against the terminal glass. Lightning flared somewhere over the runway, and an uneasy murmur rose among the waiting crowd. No one knew it yet, but the flight they were all about to board would test every inch of trust they thought they deserved. And when the sky cracked open, they'd have no choice but to look at the girl they wouldn't trust and pray she'd take control. "Ma'am, again, I'm truly sorry. He's new, and, well, we'll handle it internally." The customer service manager's voice dripped with forced sincerity. He wore a crisp navy blazer 2 sizes too tight and kept glancing over Alana's shoulder at the growing line of impatient passengers. Alana stood her ground, torn boarding pass pressed flat on the counter like evidence at a crime scene. Around Them, the terminal's stale air carried the scent of burnt coffee and wet coats. "I'm not asking for an apology," Alana said calmly. "I'm asking for a seat." The manager shifted his weight. His mouth twitched as if he wanted to say something else, something defensive, but he stopped himself. With a sigh, he tapped the keyboard, eyes flicking between the monitor. And Alana's unwavering stare. "Gate 47B, new boarding pass." He slid the reprinted slip across the counter. "We've upgraded you to row 2, a window seat." Alana's fingers brushed the fresh paper, intact, crisp, official. She held the manager's gaze a heartbeat longer than polite, then turned and walked back toward the gate. She didn't bother to look for the agent who'd ripped her ticket. She knew he was watching. People like him always watched. Inside the jet bridge, the air shifted from cold terminal chill to the stale warmth of recycled cabin air. The hum of the aircraft seeped into her bones, an undercurrent of metal, fuel, and hidden machinery died as she stepped through the doorway. A flight attendant greeted her with a tight smile that didn't touch her eyes. The brass wings on her uniform glinted under the fluorescent lights. "Welcome aboard." Alana nodded, stepping past her into the first rows of business class. Soft leather seats, passengers already unwrapping headphones, tucking pillows behind their heads, pretending not to glance up as she passed. She could feel their eyes flick over her, the silk headscarf, the simple coat, the calm on her face that made some uneasy. She stowed her small carry-on, slid into row 2A, and buckled the belt. Through the oval window, rain streamed sideways. As the wind pushed the plane against the jet bridge, beside her, an older man with a trimmed beard and a navy sweater tapped away at a laptop. He glanced at her briefly, offered a stiff nod, then returned to his spreadsheet like she was part of the background hum. Overhead, the captain's voice crackled on. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're cleared for departure. Expect mild turbulence. After takeoff, nothing to worry about. Flight time today is just over 3 hours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride." A soft chorus of seatbelts clicked shut. Alana's fingers drummed on her tray table, steady, thoughtful. The engines began their low growl, a vibration that climbed up through the seat into her chest. She closed her eyes for a moment, let herself drift. She thought of her mother's voice when she was little. "Stay calm when they push you. They hate it when you stay calm." Then, a noise died at first. It was just a tremor beneath the growl of the engines. A faint, repetitive knocking somewhere near the wing. She opened her eyes, turned to look, but the wing lights caught only the blur of rain, droplets racing each other down the glass. The sound came again. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it was the storm rattling her nerves. The residue of the gate agent's sneer still clinging to her spine. Alana shifted her focus back to the hum of the cabin. The older man beside her had already drifted off, mouth open, cursor blinking on an unfinished cell. A flight attendant leaned over a young couple a few rows ahead, offering drinks and forced smiles. The captain's voice came on again, calm as ever. "Cabin crew, prepare for takeoff." The plane lurched backward from the gate. A shudder passed through the fuselage. Rain battered the windows like 1,000 tiny fists. Alana pressed her palm against the cold glass, the roar of the engines building beneath her, somewhere inside. That roar, she thought she heard it again. The knock, the tremor, the thing that didn't belong. She exhaled, steadying herself. Not yet, she thought. Not yet. Outside, lightning forked across the distant clouds, splitting the sky in two. Inside, a girl no one trusted sat quietly, waiting for the storm to come to her. The plane pushed down the runway, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Alana felt the engine's power press her back into the seat. The familiar thrill that once brought her comfort now thrummed in her veins like static. A baby cried 3 rows behind her. The man beside her jolted awake, blinking. At the window, like he'd forgotten where he was, rain battered the fuselage. The runway lights streaked past in golden lines. Then, in one powerful surge, the wheels lifted off the ground, the sudden drop in her stomach matched by a sharp intake of breath somewhere behind her. They were airborne. Climbing through low clouds, the cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow. A flight attendant wheeled the drink cart past, forcing a smile that looked rehearsed. Tiny liquor bottles rattled together like nervous teeth. "Would you like anything to drink, miss?" Alana shook her head. She was listening. Through the hum of the engines and the occasional coughs and clinks of ice in plastic cups, that faint knock returned, a dull tap-tap-tap from somewhere near the right wing. Too irregular to be part of the normal vibration. Too soft for anyone else to notice over the polite chatter and clink of seatbelt buckles. She pressed her temple against the window, eyes scanning the wing lit by strobes, rivets, flaps. Everything looked fine, but her gut twisted. Beside her, the man with the laptop gave her a sidelong glance. "First time flying?" he asked, his tone friendly but strained, a man trying to be polite only because he couldn't sleep. Alana turned, forced a small smile. "No, not my first," he chuckled. "Then relax. Planes make all kinds of noises. Worst you'll get tonight is spilled coffee." A sudden drop in altitude silenced him. The plane dipped, not a gentle bob, but a quick shuddering drop. That sent a gasp down the aisle. A bottle rolled off the cart and cracked against the floor. The seatbelt sign dinged back on with a chime that sounded too calm for the way. The aircraft rattled. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a pocket of rough air. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Please remain seated with your belts fastened. Cabin crew, take your jump seats." The attendant's smile vanished as she locked the cart in place, knuckles white around the handle. Her eyes darted to the exit rows, then to the passengers she'd just served. She avoided Alana's stare entirely. Outside, the night was a bruise, deep blue torn with the white pulse of lightning. Each flash made the inside of the cabin flicker, like they were all inside a dying light bulb. Alana's fingers tapped her armrest. She counted the seconds between each distant thunderclap and the next flicker of lightning. She tried to listen for that knock again, but the turbulence swallowed everything in an angry growl died across the aisle. A teenager in a hoodie gripped his armrests, knuckles pale. His mother murmured soothing words that didn't match the worry in her own eyes. Another jolt, sharper this time. The overhead bins rattled. Somewhere behind her, someone cursed under their breath. Alana looked forward toward the cockpit door. A pale slab of reinforced metal that now felt like a thin promise. A flight attendant hurried down the aisle, leaning against the seats for balance, whispering quick words to another crew member strapped into her jump seat. Their eyes met Alana's. For half a second, a flicker of worry not meant to be seen, then moved on. She felt her pulse quicken. That knocking sound throbbed in her mind even when she couldn't hear it. She leaned forward, unbuckled her belt for a moment, ignoring the warning light. She crouched slightly to peer out the window at the wing surface again. The flap seemed steady, but the aileron near the tip looked uneven, or was it just the shadow? "Ma'am, you need to stay seated," the attendant called sharply, her voice trembling just enough to betray the calm script. Alana sat back, buckled in, but her eyes never left the wing. When the next drop came, a sudden stomach lurching. Plunge that made a drink spill across the tray of the man next to her. No one pretended it was normal anymore. A baby shrieked. A man muttered a prayer. Overhead, the cabin lights flickered once, then steadied. Alana's breath misted the window as she whispered to herself. Words she hadn't said in years. "Stay calm when they push you." Her mother's voice. Her father's laugh. Her own. Memory of open skies and a glider's gentle drift. Not yet, but soon. The plane rode the air like a paper scrap in a storm. It dipped and shuddered in sudden jerks that made overhead bins creak and knees knock into tray tables. Conversation shrank to sharp breaths and the occasional stifled whimper. Alana's seatbelt dug into her hip bones as she leaned forward, her forehead nearly touching the seat ahead. She could feel it now, the strange vibration that matched that hidden knock, a pulse in the metal beneath her feet. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." The intercom hissed into the silence. The captain's voice forced calm. "We're adjusting altitude to find smoother air. Nothing to be concerned about. Please stay seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. We'll be through this shortly." The lie hung heavy in the stale cabin air. A child started crying behind her, the sound raw and jagged like the wind howling just beyond the fuselage. Alana glanced sideways. The man with the laptop had closed his eyes again, mouth pinched tight. She could see the pulse in his neck racing like hers. A flight attendant crouched 2 rows ahead, whispering to another crew member buckled into the jump seat. The words were soft, but Alana caught the edge of them, a tremor of fear they hadn't managed to tuck behind their professional smiles. "Actuator?" the attendant whispered. "I heard it too, but he said keep them calm." Her voice dropped lower as she caught Alana's eyes. She straightened quickly, forcing a bright grin at the nearest passenger. "Ma'am, can I get you a water?" she asked an elderly woman clutching a rosary. The woman shook her head, lips moving silently around her prayer. The flight attendant moved on, knuckles white where they gripped the seatbacks for balance. The knock was clearer now, not just in her head. With each pocket of rough air, it stuttered through the floor like a secret code. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, hydraulic actuator. The word replayed in Alana's mind like a ripple across still water. She knew the basics, enough to understand that if something was loose in the control surfaces, it wouldn't stay hidden for long. She glanced at the wing again. It looked normal, but she knew better than to trust smooth metal and steady lights. A sharp voice cut through the hush. "What's going on?" A man near the middle of the cabin stood up, ignoring the seatbelt sign. His white shirt was wrinkled, tie loose around his neck. Fear made his words sharp as he gestured wildly at a passing attendant. "You people know something's wrong. This isn't normal turbulence. I've flown enough times to know." The attendant lifted both hands, palms out, voice rehearsed. "Sir, please, for your own safety, take your seat. Don't lie to me," he barked, voice cracking under the strain. A few rows behind him, a young couple exchanged wide-eyed glances. A phone camera glowed briefly, catching the confrontation in shaky silence. Alana watched the attendant's eyes, the flicker past the man's shoulder, the tiny nod toward the cockpit. A look passed between them, too quick for most to catch, but Alana did. They knew. They knew, and they were hoping they'd clear the storm before anyone noticed what was rattling the plane from the inside out. Hydraulic actuator. Control surfaces. If that fails. Alana's heartbeat thudded in her throat. She thought of the rows of people pressed into these narrow seats, trusting in calm voices and warm drinks and empty reassurances. The man finally dropped back into his seat as the plane lurched again, a stomach-turning sideways slip that drew a chorus of gasps. A baby's wail rose to a desperate scream. The captain's voice returned, too soon, too shaky at the edges to match the practiced calm. "Folks, we'll be descending slightly to avoid this cell. Remain seated. We appreciate your cooperation." Alana's eyes narrowed. Descending? In weather this thick? No pilot wanted to lose altitude when climbing was safer. Unless something below was safer than what they were hiding up here. She closed her eyes, drew a steady breath. The knocking continued beneath her shoes, the voice in the metal growing louder than the captain's lies. Her fingers found the edge of her scarf, smoothing it as if tying a thought together. Her mother's voice drifted through her again. Stay calm when they push you. They hate it when you stay calm. Outside the window, lightning danced so close she could see the rivets on the wing in stark relief, every bolt, every seam that might. Commandant inside the cabin. Silence settled like a held breath, every passenger listening for what they didn't want to hear. Alana knew now. The storm wasn't outside. It was already here, humming under their feet. And it was only getting louder. The seatbelt sign glowed red above Alana's head, an unblinking eye warning her to stay put. But the knock beneath her feet had grown teeth. It growled now in short, angry bursts as the plane jolted through another pocket of rough air. Her seatmate stared at her when she unclipped her belt. He opened his mouth, but whatever he was about to say died as the plane pitched sideways and his laptop slid to the floor with a soft thud. Alana braced a hand on the headrest in front of her and stood. A ripple of eyes followed her, some curious, some accusing. A flight attendant's voice snapped from behind. Ma'am, you need to sit down, but Alana ignored the voice. She steadied herself against the swaying aisle as she moved forward, feeling the low hum of the engines vibrating through her bones. She reached the galley near the front, where two attendants huddled beside the locked cockpit door. One of them, the younger woman who tried to offer her water earlier, turned at the sight of her. You can't be here. Please, you need to return to your seat. Alana lowered her voice, leaning close so only the two attendants could hear her over the roar of the engines and the slap of wind outside. You know something's wrong, she said. Her tone was soft but carried an edge that made the older attendant's eyes flicker. Miss, please, don't lie. I heard. You, Alana pressed on. Hydraulic actuator. What is it? What did the captain say to you? The older attendant's mouth tightened. He glanced at the cockpit door as if it might open at any second and swallow them whole. Miss Davis. The fact that he knew her name made her spine stiffen. We have procedures for this. You need to sit down. We're handling it. Handling? What? Alana's voice was still quiet but sharper now. If that control surface jams up in this weather, you're not handling anything. You're stalling for time. A shudder ran through the floor. The plane dropped hard enough to make the overhead bins thump. A coffee pot slid off a galley shelf and shattered, spraying hot liquid across the rubber mat. The young attendant jumped back with a yelp. The older one steadied himself, eyes darting to the cockpit door again. Alana stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. If you want to keep them calm, then tell me the truth. I know what that knock is. If the hydraulics fail, the pilot can't. Keep this plane level. A flicker of raw fear cracked the older attendant's mask. He swallowed, glancing at the cockpit again, then back at Alana, weighing something in the hush between them. There's a backup, he whispered finally. Manual control. But in this storm, the captain says it'll hold until we clear it. If we clear it. Alana's chest tightened. If, one word, heavier than all the roaring engines combined. Then, through the crack where the cockpit door met the frame, she caught a sliver of motion. The door wasn't fully latched. She stepped sideways. Lightning flashed through the forward window, illuminating a glimpse of the cockpit interior. Two pilots, hunched over flickering instruments. The captain's left hand yanked at the control column, knuckles pale, while the co-pilot tapped furiously at a row of overhead switches. A red warning light pulsed in the shadows. One pilot's voice rose, muffled but unmistakable. Slipping again? Can't trim it out. The door clicked shut with a metallic thunk as the older attendant nudged it closed with his elbow. Cutting off her view? Alana stared at the polished metal for a heartbeat, hearing only her own pulse. A rough voice startled her. Back to your seat, now. The older attendant didn't look angry. He looked afraid of what she'd just seen. Alana held his gaze. "Open that door when I tell you to," she said softly. He shook his head. "Ma'am, I can't." "You can. If they lose pitch control, they'll need help they don't have right now." She didn't wait for him to agree. She turned on her heel, moving down the aisle as the plane lurched again. Passengers watched her pass like she carried bad news stitched to her coat. As she buckled herself back into row 2A, her seatmate stared at her wide-eyed. "What did you see?" he whispered. Alana's eyes stayed fixed on the wing just outside her window, rain sheeting across the metal, the wingtip light blinking against a world of black clouds and lightning veins. "Nothing. Yet," she murmured. "But it's coming." A fresh wave of turbulence slammed through the cabin like a body blow, sending trays and cups clattering to the floor. The seatbelt sign flickered but stayed lit, the single unchanging truth in a cabin full of half-lies and forced smiles, Alana's. Seatmate braced himself against the armrests, his breath coming in sharp little huffs. Across the aisle, a child wailed into his mother's coat. The hum of whispered prayers rose like static under the roar of the engines. Outside her window, the wing shuddered visibly, the tip dipping just slightly too far before snapping back. The knocking was no longer subtle. It rattled through the floor and up her spine in hard pulses that felt like a countdown. A voice crackled over the PA, not the captain's calm mask, but a strained shout. "Cabin crew, prepare for impact. Prepare for rough air. Brace position only if instructed." The announcement died in static before the lie could be polished. Gasps rippled through the rows. The man next to Alana turned to her with wide, pleading eyes. Are we crashing?" He asked TAMMERED. Alana met his gaze. Her voice stayed calm. She shaped it into a steady hand on the chaos. "Not if I can help it." She unbuckled her belt again. He grabbed her wrist out of reflex, then let go as if shocked by his own panic. Alana rose, steady on the balls of her feet as the plane lurched again. She moved toward the front, ignoring the flight attendants. Protests. As she passed row 1, the older attendant stepped into her path, blocking her with both arms spread wide. "You can't be up here," he hissed. His face glistened with sweat under the harsh overhead lights. "I'm not asking," Alana said, voice low enough for only him to hear. "You open that cockpit door or you watch this whole plane go down with you still pretending it's fine." "Uh-huh." Woman across the aisle began to sob, loud, harsh sobs that cracked the hush in half. The older attendant's eyes darted between Alana's face and the cockpit door behind him. "You think they'll let you in there?" he whispered. "They won't even let us in right now." "Then you better get them to listen," she said. Another jolt threw them both sideways. Alana caught herself on the wall, palm flat against the cold metal. "They don't have a choice. I know what that sound is. And I know what happens if we keep pretending it's normal." Behind them, the cabin dissolved into pockets of low panic. A woman's voice called for her husband. Overhead bins rattled open. A duffel bag tumbled out and landed on an armrest with a dull thud. "Miss," the attendant started again, voice trembling. Alana stepped closer, her breath calm against the roar. "You know I'm right." "You know?" "They need help. I can fly it. If they lose hydraulics, they'll need hands to trim it out. Or we all feel that next drop and don't wake up again." He blinked at her, not seeing her headscarf or her skin or her row number now. But the calm in her eyes and the way she stood steady while the metal bird bucked and screamed around them. A sharp rattle echoed through the cabin, not just turbulence now, but a physical tearing sound like metal strained too far. A few rows back, a man shouted a prayer into his hands. A child's voice cut through it all. "Mama, what's wrong with the plane?" Alana felt the question settle in her chest like a stone. She pressed her palm flat on the galley wall, feeling the vibrations run up her arm, The voice in the metal she could almost understand now. "Please," she said softly, "open that door." The older attendant hesitated. Then, with a look that carried fear and hope in equal measure, he nodded once. He turned, rapped on the cockpit door, and shouted something over the din. A moment later, the lock clicked. The door cracked open just wide enough for Alana to see inside. The cockpit was a chaos of flashing red lights and the two pilots, pale faces under the glow of their instruments. One of them turned, eyes wide at the sight of her. He started to protest, but another violent shudder cut him off. The nose dipped sickeningly and the cabin behind her erupted in muffled screams. Alana met the pilot's eyes through the narrow opening. "You need me," she said. No hesitation, no apology. "Now let me in." Behind her, the plane rattled like it was about to tear its wings off. Ahead, the cockpit was a door into a storm she knew how to navigate, even if no one here trusted her yet. The cockpit was smaller than she remembered. She'd seen one years ago, through a summer internship that had ended before it began, before someone in a uniform whispered she didn't look like the pilot type. Now she stood inside one again, not as a trainee but as the only thing standing between a broken machine and the storm tearing at its seams. The captain's eyes flicked to her, to the older attendant behind her, then back to the blinking red. Warnings that bled across the panels like open wounds. "What the hell is this?" He barked over the engine noise. The co-pilot turned in his seat, sweat beading his forehead under the greenish glow. "You need help," Alana said evenly. "Your left actuator's stuck. You're compensating with the ailerons, but you're fighting the roll with the trim only. That's why you're burning through control authority." The captain's mouth closed, opened again. The plane lurched sideways, sharp enough that Alana grabbed the jump seat rail to steady herself. How the hell do you know that?" He snapped. Alana didn't flinch. "Because I learned on gliders. Because I know what a stuck control surface feels like when the wind shreds your lift from one side. And because if you don't let me help trim this bird manually, you're going to stall her out and spin her nose first into the ground." The co-pilot wiped sweat from his temple, eyes darting to the altimeter. "We're losing 100 feet every 10 seconds. Pitch is unstable." The plane dipped again. Shouts rose from the cabin behind them, a single echo of raw fear, muffled by the reinforced door. "Captain." Alana's voice cut through the rattle and hum. "Either you trust me for 5 minutes, or you explain to everyone back there why they don't get to see the sunrise." The captain's jaw twitched. Another violent bump slammed through the fuselage. His hands clenched the yoke so tight. His knuckles whitened. He looked at her like he wanted to spit her back into the cabin, but he didn't have time for pride now. He jerked his head at the co-pilot's seat. "Strap in." Alana didn't hesitate. She slid into the narrow right-hand chair. Her fingers found the harness clips like she'd done it 100 times before. Muscle. Memory she'd never used until now. The cockpit lights flickered as another lightning bolt split the clouds off the nose. Through the windscreen, the world was a swirl of rain and bruised sky, the wing lights blinking like distant flares in a sea of ink. Alana's eyes swept the instruments. Trim indicators, hydraulic pressure, surface position. She could see the left actuator stuck out of alignment, fighting the autopilot's last commands. "Kill the auto trim," she said. "I'll adjust manually." The co-pilot hesitated. The captain barked, "Do it." A switch flicked. A warning tone beeped. The controls shuddered under her palms like a restless animal waking up. She wrapped her right hand around the trim wheel, feeling the resistance. The nose wanted to drop. The wing wanted to dip. She could almost hear the air tearing across the fuselage, the slipstream begging for permission to tumble them sideways. Gentle. "Feel it," she murmured. Not for them, but for herself. She trimmed the nose up just enough to level the drop. The yoke fought her, but her grip stayed calm, her eyes steady on the artificial horizon glowing cold blue in the storm. The captain watched her, disbelief cracking into something like desperate trust. "You flown commercial metal before?" he asked, voice low, brittle. "No," Alana said. "But I know what keeps it in the sky when the sky doesn't want it there." A tiny bark of a laugh escaped the co-pilot, half terror, half relief. The altimeter steadied. The vibration under the deck softened by a hair. Behind them, the passengers sat in frozen silence, none of them knowing that the girl they didn't trust was now the only thing standing between them and a free fall through black clouds. Alana's breathing slowed to match the hum in her ears. She nudged the trim wheel one notch forward, then two. The aircraft answered her in small, grateful adjustments. "Hold her level," she said to the captain. "I'll keep her trimmed. You just fly." Outside the windscreen, the storm roared. Inside, Alana's hands moved with a quiet grace that needed no permission. For a heartbeat, the storm outside went blinding white, a lightning strike so close that the cockpit lit up like a flashbulb. Then darkness again, stitched with the red glow of warning lights that pulsed like an angry heartbeat across the instrument panel. The altimeter needle shivered. So did Alana's hands, but only for a second. She drew in a slow breath, pressed her palm flat on the trim wheel, and felt for the plane's weight like she was listening for a whisper under a hurricane. The captain grunted, wrestling the yoke as another jolt rocked the fuselage. Bang! A hollow metallic pop echoed from somewhere deep in the belly of the plane, the sound of metal forced to do something it wasn't designed to do. "Left actuators gone," Alana said, voice calm even as the co-pilot swore under his breath. "We've lost it completely." The captain shot her a glance, raw fear cracking through his mask of command. He checked his instruments, toggled a dead switch. "No response. You got any other ideas, lady?" He barked. Alana's eyes stayed on the artificial horizon, the blue half slipping under the brown like a tilting world. Her fingers tightened around the yoke. She could feel the plane slipping into a roll, the nose sagging into a fall the autopilot couldn't fight anymore. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Hand it to me." The captain hesitated, just long enough for the nose to dip another 5 degrees. The altimeter's steady tick became a spin. I said, "Hand it to me." Alana snapped. A second of tension. Then the captain let go. Alana slid her hands fully onto the yoke, leather-wrapped, slick with someone else's sweat. The co-pilot was muttering into the radio, voice trembling as he called out their position to an air traffic controller who probably heard nothing but static and panicked. Another blast of wind slammed the plane sideways. A child's cry filtered. Through the sealed door, Alana tuned it out. She felt only the aircraft, the stubborn weight that wanted to spin, to fall, to give in to the night. Manual only. "No hydraulic trim left," the captain said, his voice hoarse. "You'll have to fight it with pure arm strength." Alana didn't answer. She nudged the yoke left, countering the roll with the tiny slivers of control she still had. Her left hand fumbled for the emergency trim crank under the panel. Old school, primitive, but still there for moments like this. Moments when everything fancy failed. "Hold your side," she ordered the captain. "No sudden inputs." "Follow my lead." The captain nodded once, that single wordless surrender that spoke volumes. They were in her hands now. Outside, the windscreen filled with a swirl of black and white. For a second, the clouds parted just enough to show the sickening curve of city, lights far below, the truth of how fast the ground was rising to meet them. "Altitude?" Alana barked. 10,000 and falling." The co-pilot called back. "Vertical speed negative, Jesus, 4,000 feet per minute." She could feel it in her ribs. The plane wanted to nosedive. Nose first, Steel bird turned stone. Alana's arm strained as she forced the yoke back inch by inch. Her muscles burned. Her pulse roared in her ears. She heard her mother's voice again, clear as the first time. Stay calm when they push you. They hate it when you stay calm. She pushed harder. The nose inched up, a fraction, but enough. Enough for the altimeter to slow its spiral. Enough for the captain to mutter, "Come on, come on, come on." Like a prayer, a sudden blast of wind hit the left wing. The aircraft shuddered. For a heartbeat, the controls went slack, then caught again. The ground lights flashed larger in the gap between clouds, a patchwork of streets that looked like a target. A chorus of screams rose behind the door, muffled but unmistakable. The passengers knew now. They could feel the freefall too. Alana locked her jaw, breath steady. She forced the yoke back another notch, felt the vibration shift. Under her palms, the plane answered her, stubborn but willing. "You're doing it," the co-pilot whispered, like he barely believed his own eyes. Alana didn't answer. She didn't need to. The plane told her everything she needed. The subtle tremble through the controls, the heavy nose lifting by sheer will and raw muscle. Outside, the storm still howled, but the nose rose another degree. The altimeter's mad spin slowed, tick, 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 until it found level. Inside that sealed cockpit, a girl no one trusted steadied the hands of two men who were supposed to know better. Outside, a million city lights watched from below, waiting to see if the metal bird would fall or rise. Alana's arm shook, but her grip never slipped. The altimeter needle held steady, not climbing yet, but no longer spinning toward oblivion. For a heartbeat, Alana almost let herself believe they might level out cleanly. Then the wind hit again, a rolling side gust that caught the damaged wing like a slap. The cockpit rattled as metal protested in deep groans. The left wing dipped violently, the nose sagging again. She countered with the yoke, firm, patient, feeling the plane's resistance in her arms, in her shoulders. The co-pilot's voice cracked through the headset. "Stabilizers are maxed. You can't hold it like this forever." She knew that, but she also knew there was no forever to plan for, only the next second, the next breath, the next decision that kept 200 people from becoming fire and headlines. Outside the windscreen, the clouds thinned in brief flashes. Glimpses of city lights below, bright veins of gold in the black. Somewhere down there was a runway. If she could hold this altitude, she could find it. The radio sputtered in the co-pilot's hand. "This is Flight 227, Mayday, Mayday. We're declaring emergency, hydraulic failure, partial control." Mayday, then silence. The static returned, mocking them with its emptiness. The captain slammed his fist against the console. "ATC's gone. Dead signal." Alana didn't flinch. She tuned out the dead radio. She tuned out the captain's muttered curses. All she felt was the wheel in her hands, the storm rattling the fuselage like an insult hurled at her calm. "Run checklist for emergency landing," she said to the co-pilot. Her voice cut clean through the rising panic. "Restart comes. If we can't get ATC, get someone on the cabin PA, prep them for brace." The co-pilot looked at the captain, then back at her. He didn't argue. He just flipped switches, voice low and steady as he read out the emergency lines she'd memorized long ago, but never thought she'd use here. In the cabin behind them, words spread in whispers and choked gasps. The old woman with the rosary clutched it tighter, murmuring prayers for a girl whose name she didn't know. The man with the laptop, now useless at his feet, whispered to the passenger beside him, "There's someone flying who's not the pilot. She's doing it. She's keeping us up." Row by row, the rumor traveled like a spark in dry grass. A black girl at the controls. A passenger. The only calm voice in the storm. Inside the cockpit, the storm slammed another gust across the nose. The control wheel fought her grip, but Alana's hand stayed firm. Her mind spun through numbers, airspeed, flap limits, rough calculations for how far the airport might be. She heard the echoes of flight school she'd never finished. Her father's voice in her ear when she was 17, watching her trim a glider over a dusty airfield. If you listen to her, she'd talk to you. If you fight her, she'd buck you off every time. So Alana listened. She felt the sick dip in the pitch, the shudder in the left wing where the actuator had failed. She eased off the roll input just enough to let the wind slip past instead of slamming into a locked surface. The captain glanced at her hands, then at the horizon line slowly settling in the windshield. For a moment, the disbelief in his eyes softened to something close to awe, though he'd never admitted out loud. The co-pilot flicked the radio again. Nothing but static. "They can't hear us," he said. "We're on our own." Alana gave him a nod that was half smile, half command. "Then we make our own way down. Get them ready." The plane shuddered again, a long, low groan from the belly as if the metal itself were asking how much longer it had to hold. Alana pressed her lips together. She didn't pray. She didn't whisper hope into the roaring dark. She just flew. Every muscle in her arms screaming, the yoke stiff and stubborn under her grip. Below, through a tear in the clouds, runway lights winked like a promise. Distant, too far for comfort, close enough to taste if she kept the nose up. The wings level, the storm at bay for just a little longer. Behind her, 200 hearts waited in the hush between thunderclaps. Held aloft by the quiet power of the girl they'd never seen coming. The storm wasn't done yet. But now there was she. The runway appeared between ragged curtains of cloud, a narrow ribbon of flickering lights swallowed by rain and darkness. Alana's eyes locked on it like a promise she refused to break. Behind her, the cockpit was a cathedral of quiet terror, the captain half-whispering checklists to himself, the co-pilot reading out speeds in a thin voice that trembled every time the wind buffeted them sideways. Alana didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every ounce of her strength was in her hands, arms braced against the yoke that still wanted to buck her off, nose still begging to drop too fast, too soon. In the cabin, passengers clutched armrests, seatbacks each other. Prayers wove through the narrow aisles in every language. Children sobbed into coats. Some eyes stayed closed. Others stared forward, trying to see the runway through the sealed door as if sheer will would keep them flying straight. 500 feet, the co-pilot said. His voice cracked. "Speed's good. Sync rate steady. You got this." Alana's jaw tightened. The storm pressed against the wings, clawing at the flaps as she adjusted for the gusts that wanted to drag them sideways into the trees. She countered each push with subtle corrections, a dance she'd practiced in old textbooks, half-finished flight lessons, and 1,000 daydreams about who she was supposed to be. "Landing gear down," she ordered. The captain complied. With a nod that felt like a final surrender, a muted clunk shivered through the deck, the wheels dropping into the wet night. 200, the co-pilot breathed. Outside the windscreen, the lights grew larger, a line of gold on black. The storm made them flicker, but they stayed where they were supposed to be, waiting for her. A moment of calm settled in her chest. Not silence, never silence, but calm, the kind that came when you knew exactly what you were about to do. She felt the final push of wind off the left wing, the last insult the sky could throw at her. She didn't fight it hard. She rode it, angled the nose just enough to slip past the drag, then straightened at the last heartbeat. In the cabin, the old woman with the rosary whispered the last line of her prayer and held her breath. Alana brought them down. The wheels kissed the runway with a muted shriek. Not a crash, not a slam. A kiss rough but forgiving. tires spitting spray behind them as the rain-slick concrete welcomed steel and rubber back to earth. The fuselage shivered. As the spoilers deployed, another jolt through the yoke. Alana kept her hands steady as the captain added reverse thrust, the engine roar dropping from a scream to a ragged sigh. They slowed. The runway lights crawled past on either side. The cabin stayed silent for 2 full seconds, the hush of disbelief. Then, slowly, from somewhere near the back, a single clap, another, a voice crying out, a sob breaking into laughter. Applause spilled down the narrow aisle, row by row, like rainwater through a gutter, messy, raw, unstoppable. Alana's hands slipped from the yoke. Her shoulders slumped with the weight of every muscle she'd fought to keep steady. The captain looked at her, not like a pilot looking at a passenger, but like a man looking at the one person who'd carried his ship home. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Thank you, he rasped out. She gave him a small nod. You kept her flying. I just helped her land. When the wheels finally stopped rolling, the rain hammered the roof in gentle applause of its own. Alana stood in the cockpit doorway as the flight attendants cracked it open. She could see the passengers, tear-streaked faces, shaky smiles. A few phones lifted to capture her silhouette against the stormlit windows. Some stared at her like she was a ghost. Some like she was a miracle. To her, she was exactly who she'd always been, the girl who knew how to fly when no one believed she should. She stepped out into the aisle. A child reached for her hand, wide eyes full of a question he didn't need to ask. She squeezed his fingers once, light but sure, row by row. She walked back down the narrow tunnel she'd once entered as a passenger. Emergency lights strobed against the rain as the ground crew raced to meet them. But inside, there was only this hush, the hush of 200 people who would never forget the girl they'd almost overlooked. Alana paused at the exit, rain splattering her scarf through the open door. She looked back once at the steel bird that had tried to break her and failed. Then she stepped down the stairs into the storm, and this time the world knew exactly who she was.